coming to you from the mountains and the plains. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Altman.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Altman and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire, going solo again because the China virus has stricken our Colorado studio. Mr. Producer Josh is out with the Rona. I don't know if Joe has tested positive, but he's acting like he has it. He's presuming that he has it since he was in close contact with Evan. So it's just me. We have extreme social distancing. I'm in Texas, so the Colorado coronavirus, China virus, Wuhan plague can't get me here.
Hey!
So
I never got the China virus.
And that's our producer Evan. Everyone give some words of encouragement for Evan. He's filling in for Josh this afternoon. Not everyone has, but it definitely went through with Josh and Joe. So a lot to talk about today because YouTube now has a new policy that they just came out with. We can go ahead and put up my screen, Evan. The new policy is that they're going to support the 2020 election. Now listen, I support the 2020 election. I want to make sure that it's legitimate. I want to make sure that every legal vote counts, every illegal vote is tossed out, and the irregularities and the discrepancies, which we've talked about on the show for over a month now, are fully explained, right? Treating us like we're conspiracy theorists because we want to know why certain precincts that went heavily for Biden had greater than 100% voter turnout. We're not conspiracy theorists for wondering that. We're not conspiracy theorists for asking why in Philadelphia, for example, there was a surge in 90-year-olds registering to vote. An absolute surge. Like almost all the 90-year-olds who weren't registered to vote just happened to register to vote in time for this election. We're not conspiracy theorists for wondering why in a given year we expect 3 to 4% of the ballots to be tossed out in Pennsylvania or Georgia, not for malicious reasons, just because people make mistakes on their ballot. We're not conspiracy theorists to wonder why, in a year where so many more people are using absentee ballots for the first time, that number of spoiled ballots didn't go up, but it went down to less than 0.5%. And we're not conspiracy theorists, but YouTube wants to brand us that way. So we're going to try and figure out ways. We're still going to use YouTube. We're growing our audience there. We want to keep publishing there. If we're not allowed to publish our voter fraud episodes on YouTube, we're going to have to find another platform to share them on. So we're looking at DLive. We're looking at Rumble. I'm still trying to figure out how to use Rumble. It seems pretty straightforward. I know you have to pay for it, but they haven't given me a way to put a credit card in, so I'm still trying to figure that out. It's not quite as user-friendly as I expect it to be, but we're going to be over there. DLive might be a way for us to live stream. We're going to stay with YouTube, stay with Facebook when we can. But just wanted to give you guys an update because Facebook's coming for us. They're coming for everyone. It doesn't sound like they're going to take down anything we've already posted, though that could change. But starting today, anyone who alleges widespread voter fraud or counting problems is not allowed to publish on YouTube. So for today, we're probably going to have to go with the way that we talk about the coronavirus, which is me telling you what I'm not allowed to tell you. Like, I'm not allowed to tell you that COVID-19 has a 99.8 survival rate. I'm not allowed to tell you that. Right? So we might have to go that route by saying I'm not allowed to tell you that there was voter fraud. That might be how we have to proceed, at least in the short term. But I want to read a bit of this because it's pretty stunning what YouTube's saying. Over the past weeks and months, we've seen people coming to YouTube to learn more about where and how to vote, or learning more about a candidate or issue. Yeah. So they're going to remove content that violates their policies. And if you go down, this is incredible. Yesterday was the safe harbor deadline for the U.S. presidential election, and enough states have certified their election results to determine a president-elect. Well, it's not how it works, right? You still have to go to Congress. Congress has to certify the certifications. Electoral College has to vote, and then Congress has to pretty much certify that, right? So there's still a lot of steps between now and actually having a president-elect. But they're saying that the safe harbor deadline is the date they're going to use to say, nope, no more. Anyone who speaks Arabic, halas on the voter fraud conversation. The safe harbor date, as we explained, is just the last date in which states can certify their results and guarantee that it will reach Congress in time. There are plenty of examples throughout history of states going past the safe harbor deadline. The most recent example would have been 2000 with Florida. Florida did not finally get their certification done until I think the day before the final deadline. It was either December 13th or December 14th of that year. So the safe harbor date is not like they're trying to use that as the date to say, oh, we're done. It's final. Just like they tried to do the same with the election. There are still election lawsuits pending. And the big one, Texas v. Pennsylvania et al., which we talked about yesterday. Now the Supreme Court is demanding that those 4 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, provide briefs to the Supreme Court replying to Texas's lawsuit. And Texas's lawsuit is very well written, very intelligently written, to go towards a strict constitutional interpretation, meaning that any changes to election law that do not go through the legislature must be voided, because the United States Constitution says that the state legislatures decide how electors are chosen. And any attempt by a non-legislative body to change that violates the U.S. Constitution. So I'm not sure if we're allowed to tell you that. But we're going to keep telling you the news, telling you the truth. And we're not conspiracy theorists, right? We don't buy into the conspiracy theories. Joe is an affiant. I mean, this is how crazy this gets. Joe is an affiant, and he has signed under penalty of perjury, attesting to the fact that he heard someone on a phone call who works with Dominion telling other people who are Antifa that don't worry, he's made sure that Trump won't be able to win. Joe then did a deep dive of this person, Eric Coomer, this person's Facebook pages, and was able to uncover all of these crazy stuff. The guy is very much pro-Antifa, right? The guy is very anti-Trump, like rabidly anti-Trump, like as anti-Trump as it gets. But even worse than that, he's anti-conservative, right? We showed Facebook posts, and anyone who can go back and watch that, you can. We showed Facebook posts of Eric Coomer belittling Southern conservatives, right? Posting these really weird messages, like speaking in a fake Southern drawl, typing in a fake Southern drawl, basically mocking anyone from the South. This was the guy who works for Dominion, helped create their whole system. His name's on the patents. Yesterday, we can go ahead and we can put this up. Mr. Producer, go ahead and put up my screen. Yesterday, this guy, Eric Coomer, published an op-ed in the Denver Post, and it says, and the title is guest commentary. I work for Dominion Voting Systems. I did not commit voter fraud. The attacks against me need to stop. So this might be a true statement. I mean, voter fraud tends to be someone illegally voting, right? At least the way I look at it, if someone is manipulating election hardware, I wouldn't really consider that voter fraud. I consider that vote theft. I consider that other crimes, but voter fraud is really illegal people voting who shouldn't be voting, at least in my interpretation. I personally wouldn't, knowing everything we already know about Eric Coomer, I wouldn't actually consider him, even if he did all the things alleged against him, I wouldn't necessarily define that as voter fraud, right? I would, there'd definitely be wire fraud involved, right? Anytime you commit a crime over the airwaves, over telecommunication wires, that's wire fraud. So that would definitely fit the bill. I don't know if I'd count it voter fraud. It would definitely be manipulating an election. It'd definitely be election theft, but it might not be fraud. So anyway, he wrote this long op-ed explaining what he does, saying the safekeeping of elections is of the utmost importance. He has a nice little headshot. Love it. And this is why I'm sad that Joe is out today. He would have loved to talk about this, but we have to talk about it because this is the news from yesterday. So we get down here. Get out of here, Denver Post. I'm not paying for you. So he's basically disputing the glitches. And here's the big one. Despite the election security, a litany of defamatory statements continues to be made about me by officials with the Trump campaign, the president's personal attorneys, the president's family members, all media personalities. I guess that's me and Joe, and countless social media trolls. I want to be very clear. I have no connection to the Antifa movement. False. I did not rig or influence the election. Nor have I participated in any calls, demonstrations, or other demonstrable activity related to any political party or social justice action group. All claims that someone recorded me on a call or even overheard me saying, "Don't worry about the election, Trump's not going to win, I made expletive sure of that," are wholly fabricated. Moreover, I do not have the capability to do such a thing. I have not written a single line of code in the Dominion voting systems product. The constant repetition of these baseless rumors has not only brought harm to me, but also to my family. These lies that aim to ruin my reputation, my livelihood, my relationships, my well-being, and my life will not go unanswered. These fabrications and attacks against me have upended my life, forced me to flee my home, and caused my family and loved ones to fear for my safety, and I fear for theirs. That's interesting because the fact checkers rated it false to say that he was missing. So here in his own words, he's admitted that this whole thing surrounding him has forced him to flee his home. But if I was to post something that say he's missing or he was missing, I would be labeled false. You see how the fact checkers work? He can admit to it, but if we say it, we're false. It is unconscionable that certain fringe media personalities, I guess that's me, looking to increase personal notoriety, yeah, that's what this is all about, website traffic, no, and ad revenue, this podcast isn't monetized yet, would continue to prey on the fears of a public concerned about the safety and security of our electoral system. Additionally, any posts on social media channels purporting to be from me have also been fabricated. I do not have a Twitter account, and my Facebook account is not active. These individuals are impersonating me. Now, that's a very cleverly worded statement. We've never actually posted anything of him on Twitter. We've posted his Facebook posts. So he says, I do not have a Twitter account, and my Facebook account is not active. Let me go ahead and take it off my screen, Mr. Producer. We never claimed that his Facebook page was still active, right? We went and we showed posts from him from 2016, anti-Trump posts. Remember that one post from early November of 2016 saying, here we go, hashtag wide margins, hashtag no recount. We didn't fabricate that. Like, he's not nearly interesting enough for us to fabricate that. Like, he's not worth me spending even 30 seconds to load up Photoshop on my computer. But he's not worth it. Right? The reason that we're talking about it is because those are real posts from him. Right? He really did post on Facebook an Antifa manifesto. Right? He really did post links to songs, music videos. They're anti-police, calling police pigs, ACAB, all police are bastards. Right? He really did those things. And interspliced between all of that, we also showed posts from years ago of people whenever voting machines would go down. Like, there was one post that was actually shared in Denver from a Facebook page called Denver Now. And someone posted it on Eric Coomer's Facebook page. And the article was election machines in Denver go down. And someone posted to Eric Coomer's Facebook page and says, hey, Eric, is this you? And he responded, no, it's not us. Dominion doesn't have machines in Denver. So are we really supposed to believe that not only did we Photoshop his post, but we also Photoshopped the communications, the conversations of people posting to his page asking whether machine downtime was related to Dominion? Come on, guys. No, we didn't fabricate this. And this is the interesting thing. That would be, what he said, would be libelous if he said us by name. Joe can probably make a case for libel, but it's hard. It's hard to claim libel when someone doesn't direct it at you, right? He says alt media personalities, social media trolls. It's hard for us to say that he's libelous towards us for the fact that he didn't mention Max McGuire or Joe Ullman. But it's definitely close. And I think that if we keep talking about this, we might be able to get a response from him. Shh, don't tell anyone. We might be able to get him to actually accuse us by name. So it's an interesting thing, right? He's allowed to respond to us, but according to Facebook, YouTube's new terms of service, we're not allowed to respond to him. We're not allowed to respond to him. Let's go ahead and put up my screen again, Mr. Producer. I actually didn't read the post from YouTube. This is the post. This is the blog post from YouTube. They said yesterday was a safe harbor deadline for the United States presidential election, and enough states, yada, yada, Biden wins, whatever. Given that, we will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or anytime after that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors changed the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election, in line with our approach towards historical U.S. presidential elections. For example, we remove videos claiming a presidential candidate won the election due to widespread software glitches or counting errors. We will begin enforcing this policy today and will ramp up in the weeks to come. So that's interesting. So they'll remove anything that alleges widespread software glitches or counting errors. If you actually read into it, oh no, they say widespread fraud. So we can't talk about widespread fraud. Are we allowed to talk about individual fraud? Like, can we talk about the Ruby Freeman? Can we talk about her? And not alleging a grand nationwide conspiracy? This is ridiculous, right? This is absolutely ridiculous that YouTube's doing this, and it flies in the face of their Section 230 protections. And yes, we're going to be talking about that today because we have the ability right now to shut this down. Not just YouTube. We have the ability to shut Facebook down. We have the ability to shut it all down, but only if we fight against their Section 230 protections. Now, what does that mean? Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. You go ahead and put this up. This is 47 USC Section 230. Protection for private blocking and screening of offensive materials. So this is a law that Congress passed giving tech companies, websites, the ability to censor certain things without turning themselves into a publisher. What is the difference? A publisher is something like the New York Times, where they have an editorial staff, and the editorial staff decides what does and what does not get published. So anytime you editorialize and you make editorial decisions on what can and cannot be published, you're a publisher. A platform would be a neutral forum. Think of a platform like it's, I don't know, like a bulletin board on the side in a community center outside of a building, right? It's unregulated. Sure, if you post offensive things, someone might take it down, but anyone is free to walk up to that bulletin board, take a little pin or whatever, staple gun, and staple up whatever message they want to put on it. If you own the bulletin board and someone staples up a paper being used in the commission of a crime or to further a crime, you owning the bulletin board, it's not your fault. You had no idea, right? Once you learn, you're expected to take it down, but you can't be charged as an accomplice if someone is basically recruiting for a terrorist act, a terrorist attack on your bulletin board. You had no idea. Now, if you are the editorial staff at the New York Times and someone submits a letter to the editor asking for help recruiting people for a terrorist attack, and you decide to publish it, then yes, you're on the hook. You are an accessory to that crime. So that's kind of the delineation, to put it in very simple terms, between a platform and a publisher. Platforms are not responsible for what people post because they didn't have a hand in deciding whether or not it goes up. Publishers, by the act of deciding what can and cannot be published, are on the hook for what gets published. So we'll put up again my screen, Section 230, 47 USC Section 230, basically creates exceptions, ways for platforms to censor without going so far as to become publishers. And this is important when you look at how tech companies have been able to operate. They've claimed for years that they were the public forum. I mean, when Trump bans people on Twitter, they sued Trump as president and said, you can't ban people. Twitter is a public forum. And the judge agreed. But Twitter maintains that they're not a public forum, that they have the ability to censor. So it's really, really ridiculous. But this is the important part of this. So you look at B. Is the policy of the United States to promote the continued development of the internet and other interactive computer services and other interactive media, to preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists for the internet, to encourage the development of technologies which maximize user control over what information is received by individuals, families, and schools who use the internet, to remove disincentives for the development and utilization of blocking and filtering techniques that empower parents to restrict their children's access to objectionable and inappropriate online material, and to ensure vigorous enforcement of federal criminal laws to deter and punish trafficking in obscenity, stalking, and harassment by means of computer. So you need to understand why Section 230 exists. And they just laid it out. Section 230 exists. If you look at B5, it exists primarily to stop websites from being used to traffic in illegal activities. So one of the pushes for this was child pornography. Different things that would exploit children. Not necessarily pornography, but if you look at Craigslist back in the day, basically pimping out children. And when you looked at Craigslist was a platform, right? You can post anything you want on it within reason, and it's just a classified section. Well, websites like that were being used to traffic children, to traffic illegal child pornography, right? And the government wanted to go after the websites. The websites were saying, whoa, we didn't know it was there. Some of them were lying. Some of them really knew and just turned a blind eye. But many of them said, no, we didn't know that. There's so many things being posted to our site. We had no idea. You can't hold us as a publisher. We didn't know. We can't hold us criminally or civilly liable. We didn't know. So Congress stepped up and passed this Section 230 to give platforms, bona fide platforms, the ability to censor certain things without being classified as a publisher, meaning they can editorialize and decide what does and does not get published without being held liable. The example being a platform can say, we're not going to let terrorist calls to action be posted, and then they won't be reclassified as a publisher. So we get down here to the actual part of the Section 230. That's Section C. Protection for Good Samaritan, blocking and screening of offensive material. This is the law that allows YouTube, presumably, to say no one can say the election was stolen and get away with it without having to lose any of their liability protections. So it says Section C1, treatment of publisher or speaker. No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. Meaning, if we post something very illegal on YouTube, it's not YouTube's fault, it's our fault. Makes sense. Civil liability, though. No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be held liable on account of, quote, any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access to or availability of material that the provider or user considers to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, I've never even seen that word, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected. So the reason that language is in there, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected, the reason that that's in there is because there are people who say pornography, illegal pornography, is art. So there was a whole big argument about that in the 80s, 90s. Pornography is art. You cannot restrict it on the basis of it being lewd because it is art. So that was added in there to make sure that websites that don't want pornography posted could still take it down, even if it is constitutionally protected. The bad part of this, the part that is being completely abused, is this part, or otherwise objectionable. So there is no one can actually claim that us publishing a video claiming that there was widespread election fraud, no one can claim that it was obscene, lewd, filthy, excessively violent, or harassing. You can't claim it. Right? It doesn't meet any legal definition. What YouTube can claim is that it is otherwise objectionable. That is the way that is the part of the law YouTube is using to silence anyone who criticizes the 2020 election results without becoming civilly liable for what gets posted on their site. This has to change. Absolutely, it has to change. And why are they? Lots of people say, oh, well, even if you take that part out, take the otherwise objectionable out, they won't care. What do they care if they're a publisher? Well, it would be a big deal if Facebook or YouTube or Twitter got reclassified as publishers. Let's go ahead and put up my screen again. This is from not too long ago. I think this is from last year. Facebook removes 8.7 million sexual photos of kids in the last 3 months, and that was published in October of 2018. That's good. Facebook is removing sexually explicit photos of children. That is good. but I guarantee you they didn't catch all of it. I guarantee it. I guarantee there are people out there doing really sick stuff on Facebook. Facebook would be buried in civil lawsuits if they didn't have the liability protection under Section 230. If they were held accountable for everything that gets posted, they would have been held liable in between when it got posted and when they deleted it, right? And they'd be held liable for anything they missed. Now, is that fair? No, it wouldn't be fair, right? But it also isn't fair for them to act like a publisher and then claim immunity from any of the liability that would come along with publishing. Right? It's not fair for Facebook to censor people and then say, oh, well, you can't hold us accountable. We don't decide what goes up and what gets taken down. It's not true. Right? It's absolutely not true. You look at this one. Social media stepped up. Crackdown on terrorists still falls short. YouTube, Facebook, and other sites are working together to find and delete extremist propaganda and recruiting videos, but a new study says they can do better. In other words, they took down a lot of terroristic content, but some still got left up. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, they would not exist if they were held civilly or criminally responsible for the ISIS recruiting videos that were published to their platforms. They would not exist. They would be gone inside of a year. Gone. Right? Anyone killed by ISIS could make an argument, whether it's stand up or not, no idea. They could make an argument that they were killed because these tech companies allowed those terrorist organizations to recruit on their sites. They'd be gone. They'd be gone in a year. So yes, they absolutely have a financial incentive to remain a platform. If you get rid of this section 230, the part of section 230, the one that says otherwise objectionable, if you get rid of that language and get rid of the subjectivity of it and stop YouTube and Facebook or any of these big tech companies from defining what can and cannot be posted. If you set it in stone, it cannot be lewd, it cannot be obscene, right? All those definitions have all those words have real definitions. But if you take out the subjective part, then Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, they have to decide. Are they willing to become civilly liable for every illegal thing posted on the site? Or will they put an end to the censoring of conservative content? Can't have it both ways. If you get rid of that part of Section 230, these tech companies would have to decide. They'd have to decide. And does anyone really think their shareholders would be okay with Twitter deciding, no, we're not going to be a platform. We're going to leave ourselves open to becoming a publisher? No. It's a worldwide website, app. There's no way that Twitter could possibly review everything that gets posted. It's just not possible. Same with Facebook. Facebook, they claim, oh, we have billions of users. Well, they don't have billions of employees. So yes, things would fall through the cracks. Or they'd have to set up a content monitoring system that would become so overbearing that no one would want to use the platform. Right? If every time you wanted to post something, you had to wait 20 minutes for it to post so someone could take a look at it, you go somewhere else. Right? Their shareholders would not stand for that. I mean, I sold it. I owned one share of Twitter just because, diversify. I owned like one or two shares. I sold that. I was like, nah, I don't want to be part of this. Does anyone really think that shareholders will stay in the game if they see that Twitter has decided that they're going to become the Washington Post? No, of course not. So that's what needs to be happening. And President Trump has threatened to veto the next round of spending legislation unless these two words of Section 230, 47 U.S.C. Section 230, he has threatened to veto it unless those two words, otherwise objectionable, are removed. And he's absolutely right to do it. Right? He is in court. His lawyers are in court. Texas is before the Supreme Court arguing, not necessarily fraud. Right? The Texas lawsuit, the ingenious part of it is it doesn't allege fraud. It says there are irregularities. It says that there are statistical anomalies, but it doesn't allege fraud. Right? Because when you allege fraud, you have the burden of proving the fraud. No, they're not alleging fraud. They're alleging changes to the law that were illegal and as a result unconstitutional that would have enabled fraud. Right? And the other states have a right to guarantee that every other state conducts their election by the rules. That's essentially the Texas lawsuit. And there was a part I was reading again. We weren't able to go through all 92, all 92 pages of it last night. But there's a really interesting part where the brief actually says that Texas admits that most people really have an interest in who becomes president, understandably. But the states have an interest in who becomes vice president, because the vice president is the president of the Senate. And in a close election where it is, if both seats go in Georgia go blue, it would be a 50-50 split in the United States Senate. Whoever is vice president is that tie-breaking vote. So the Senate, the states have a legitimate, vital interest in who becomes the vice president. And when you violate the law and violate the Constitution in the process of selecting that vice president, you can prove damages to the states. That's how Texas is able to file the lawsuit. Now, again, whether or not the Supreme Court agrees or not, can't tell you. But it's a legitimate argument that presents the facts as we've been talking about them, but leaves out the whole burden of having to prove fraud. Because that's the whole thing. We all know that there was fraud. We've talked about little instances of it, but it comes down to, can you prove it? Can you absolutely prove it? And that's the challenge of it all. Lots of people saying, lots of people complaining that Texas filed the lawsuit and that no states have officially signed on to it. I was doing some digging on that, and it seems like a state can't sign on to it in between when it is added to the docket and when it is actually accepted, right? If the Supreme Court decides to move forward and hear the case, then they would put out a notice for amicus briefs, all that. Then these states would be able to join on. So because Texas filed it 2 days ago, I don't think it's actually possible in between now and when the other side's briefs have to come in for anyone to join the lawsuit. And the reason for that is the Supreme Court doesn't know if they're going to take the case or not. It's not worth the time, the effort to change everything up. So it's definitely, we know that states, I've seen anywhere from 5 to 10. Most places are reporting 7 or 8. We know that other states are going to sign up for to join the Texas lawsuit. The fact that they haven't yet isn't a sign of necessarily of cowardice, but of the actual rules governing when they can and cannot join a lawsuit. So we're about halfway through the podcast today, and this is a great time as ever to remind everyone, Mr. Brewster, go ahead and put up my screen. This is a great time to remind everyone that we still have these Come and Take It Christmas shirts up on the Conservative Daily store. You can still get these in time for Christmas with rush shipping. So make sure you check this out. Come and Take It Christmas, modeled after the Texas battle flag. When the Mexican army said, give up your cannons, Texas said, no, come and take them. Modeled after the Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. Anyone who's seen the movie 300 knows that story. Instead of a cannon, though, it has a Christmas tree because they're trying to cancel Christmas. Turn on CNN, turn on MSNBC, turn on Fox even now, and they have a live counter of how many COVID deaths and COVID infections just from today. So they're trying to scare you out of celebrating the birth of Christ. Our t-shirt sends a very simple message to people like that. No way. If you want Christmas, come and take it. So make sure if you support the channel, want to show the world that you don't want to listen to Anthony Fauci and the like, make sure you head over to the store, link in the description, and pick up one of your Come and Take It Christmas shirts before it's too late. So we can go ahead and take that off the screen now. So as I mentioned, Trump, people coming in late might be saying, what are we talking about being censored? As we mentioned at the top, YouTube now says that they will remove any video after today that alleges widespread fraud, glitches, or errors change the results of the election. So since the beginning, this show, obviously with Joe's case, which is being handled by Powell, he is an affiant. He is alleging ear witness testimony of potential fraud. So he is signed under penalty of prosecution that's what he heard. That's one thing. But for the rest of the show, we've been dealing with mainly primary source material or statistical analyses. We haven't been really delving into the conspiracy theory side of it. And we saw a lot of that coming out after the election, which ended up not necessarily being proven true. The whole notion like, oh, every ballot is watermarked, so we'll be able to find that. That stuff, we identified that early on as, yeah, I hope that that's true. But it isn't really supported by a whole lot of evidence, so we didn't run with it. And I think it's important to note that there are two different sides to this whole thing. There are people who, and for no fault of their own, they're very eager to overturn the results. Anytime something comes across their screen, they share it. right? And again, it's not their fault. There's a lot of people out there pushing misinformation, pushing what they hope is, as opposed to reporting what is. What is what is. So we've kind of stayed away from that. We focused on the videos from places like Georgia. We focused on the statistics, the admissions, like the woman Claire Woodall-Vogg in Milwaukee, who admitted to losing the thumb drive for 10 to 20 minutes, containing I'm pretty sure all of the absentee votes in Milwaukee. It's gone for 10, 20 minutes. They rediscover it, plug it in, and whoop, Joe Biden has all the votes he needs to take the lead. And we've been looking at that, and we've been asking the question, does anyone seriously think that all of these anomalies just happen naturally? Does anyone seriously think it? Anyone who can present evidence that these are legitimate spikes in the voting totals, happy to hear it. But until you do, we're going to continue to question it. We're going to question it. We won't, unless we can prove it, we're not necessarily going to allege complete widespread fraud. But if we see something that doesn't make sense, we're going to question it. We're going to ask the questions. If YouTube wants to take us down for asking the questions, well, that's going to be an interesting lawsuit. But I hope it doesn't get to that point. And Ashley in the comment section on YouTube said, Max, did you see where what Eric Coomer said about Conservative Daily is lying about me? Yeah, we covered that at the start, that he's claiming that we made up his Facebook posts, which we didn't. He's not nearly interesting enough for us to fake all those. Like, I mean, when we first did the reveal of Eric Coomer and Dominion, and again, we were the first place that mentioned his name. We were the first place. I have no idea what anyone said afterwards, since, but we were the first people that outed him because, Joe, it was the ear witness to that call. One of the reasons I was very frustrated on that episode is Joe sent me 4 emails of like 80 some odd screenshots. And I was trying to go through all of them to figure out which one we want to show at which time. I don't have the time to fabricate that many screenshots of his Facebook page, to fabricate that many comments on his Facebook page. I don't have the time. I wish I did. If I did, I'd use it doing other things, right? But I don't have the time to fabricate that. But him alleging that we did, it's definitely borderline libelous if he actually uses Joe's name, my name, or our channel's name. It would absolutely be libelous. So what do we do? What do we do about this censorship? As I mentioned, we're going to be looking at other potential platforms, not publishers, platforms. I'm looking at DLive. DLive is like a Twitch, but they claim to be more free speech oriented. Not sure I buy it, but we'll try it out. And over the next couple of weeks, there's probably going to be a lot of trying things out. We're going to stay on Facebook because that's where our biggest audience is. And we'll keep publishing to YouTube when we're not talking about election fraud, which doesn't have to be every day, right? But it has been lately. But we're going to add a third place. We're going to add a third place where we're going to be sharing it. And we just have to figure out what that is. I definitely want to start putting us on Rumble. I'm not sure. Anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that Rumble allows live streaming. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm still trying to dive in. They don't make it very easy to sign up as a partner on Rumble. So we're going to keep checking that out. But there will be a third place that we're going live. So we'll keep you in the loop as we figure that out. Yes, anyone who's in the text club, your text will get a little bit longer with one more option to watch live. And that's a great segue opportunity to remind everyone that we do have a text club. Right now, we are being throttled heavily by Facebook. All last week, we had 300, 400, 500 people on our channel just on Facebook alone live at one time. Now we're just barely over 200, and that's because we got fact-checked the other day. So the way that we get around this, so when Facebook throttles you, they basically make it so that you can post, you can go live, but they restrict people from organically finding you, meaning they restrict you from showing up in their news feeds. And people, when you hit share, it restricts your share from showing up in other news feeds. But don't stop. Keep hitting the share button. We need that to bust through the algorithm. If you want to get around Facebook and get around YouTube, the way you do that is by joining our text club. And you can do that by texting the word freedom to 89517. Freedom to 89517. And what that does is we'll send you a text alert when we go live so that you don't have to wait for Facebook or YouTube to send you a push notification. You can look right in your text messages and get to our live stream right from there. So that's how we get around that. So make sure you text the word freedom to 89517 if you haven't already. So right now in Congress, we have this fight over Section 230. And I don't want to get overly nerdy, though I do enjoy nerding out on this. There's a fight. President Trump has threatened to veto it, and the GOP and the Democrats think they can call his bluff. Mr. Producer, go ahead and put up my screen. This is the latest news yesterday. The House approves a spending bill without Section 230 repeal. The bill passes with a veto-proof majority, which is significant because Trump says he'll veto the bill unless it repeals an unrelated law protecting social media. So we can see right now that the Republicans are caving. The Republicans are going up against Trump. And as of right now, it has a veto-proof majority, meaning there are enough people in the House of Representatives. There are the 2/3 necessary that even if Trump vetoes it, they could override it in the House. Now, whether or not they have 66 votes in the Senate, not sure. Most parties try to shy away from overriding their own president's veto. So there were a number of times during Obama's years where Obama would veto things or would just threaten to veto things. And that would be enough to basically force the Democrats into line. Even if they supported something, they agreed not to vote for it because they didn't want to make Obama look bad. I have a feeling that the Republicans aren't going to grant Trump the same courtesy. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't think they're gonna. I think that they're gonna protect big tech. I mean, they spent all year saying that they're gonna repeal Section 230 or change it, alter it, and now they have a chance with the president saying this is his line in the sand. Don't you dare cross it. And instead of actually doing what they promised to do, they're cowering. Why? Well, big tech has a lot of money. They have a lot of power. And these people are ultimately, they're cowards. I mean, people like Ted Cruz, they're legitimate, strong, faithful conservatives. But the rest, like the majority of the Republican Party, they're cowards. Absolutely cowards. And listen, I'm not saying Ted Cruz is the only one. There's others. But the sum of its parts, the GOP equals cowardice these days. It's sad. It's very sad, but they never seem to want to do what they say they're going to do. They never seem to make good on their promises. So ultimately, we're going to see in the next couple of days whether Trump keeps his promise. There's been a lot of times over the Trump presidency where he's threatened to veto something and then kind of backed down. He's threatened to veto it and then said, you know what, I'll let it pass anyway. Or he finds a way to save face. I'm hoping that this isn't one of those times. I'm hoping he actually vetoes it. I do. Whether or not the defense bill should be, I would personally shut down the whole government. Let the troops get their paychecks, right? Shut down everything else. But this is the line he's drawn. He said nothing passes until Section 230 is repealed. They're trying to call his bluff by pushing through the defense bill. And that way they can, that's what Democrats and rhinos always do. They say, oh, well, we're against Section 230, but come on, it would be unconscionable to stop the troops from getting their paychecks. Yeah, it would. But it's unconscionable that you've let big tech get this powerful. It's unconscionable that you allow big tech to silence people using a law designed to stop the spread of child pornography. It's unconscionable that we now need to watch what we say. And I'm going to spend the rest of today finding another way to get our voice out there because YouTube has found a way to use a law against child pornography to silence conservative political thought. That's unconscionable. They should have dealt with this years ago. The fact that we're getting to this, if Trump loses, this is the end of his presidency. If he ultimately loses, listen, I hope that this thing gets overturned. But if this is the last accomplishment of Trump's presidency, stopping 230, repealing or amending 230 to get rid of big tech's liability protections, that would make his entire presidency a success. Because we saw what big tech did in the lead up to the election, covering up the Hunter Biden story, claiming that he was hacked when he wasn't. He's a crackhead. He's a crackhead who forgot he put his laptops in to get repaired. Never paid his bill, never came up to pick it up. Per the terms of the laptop repair company, those laptops become the property of the repair shop. He didn't pay his bills, didn't pick them up. Sorry. In lieu of payment, they're taking the laptops. Very common in tech repair, in the tech repair industry. He wasn't hacked. He was a crackhead who forgot to pick up his broken laptops. But they said, oh no, he's hacked. We don't allow the spreading of hacked content. And they silenced it. Enough people, there were enough Democrats when polled. They ran a poll and they asked Democrats, would you have still voted for Joe Biden if you knew about the Hunter Biden scandal? And there were enough Democrats who said no, that if that poll was correct and it was applied to the election results, not even talking about the fraud, not even talking about the illegal voting, there was enough Democrats there admitting that, yeah, they wouldn't have voted for Biden if they knew about Hunter Biden stuff, would have changed the results in multiple states. In all the swing states, would have changed the results. So big tech put their finger on the scale. The question is, do we let them get away with it? Do we let them continue to do it? Win or lose with this presidential election, will Trump let them continue to do this? Can they spit in his face and actually expect him to say, thank you, can I have another? I don't see it. I don't see it. But then again, Trump has been advised by a very bad set of advisors. There have been people who, over his presidency, have given him terrible advice. He would have been much better served following Steve Bannon's advice and spending his first 100 days crossing off every single promise he made. He'd be much better served, right? If he had repealed the DACA program on day one, it would have reached the Supreme Court last year. Even if they had tossed it out, it would have given another year to make it up and make it permanent, right? If he had gotten out of the UN climate agreement on day one, right, we would already have been out of it for a year plus by now, right? So he would have been much better served if he had listened to conservative advisors. Unfortunately, a lot of people that Trump brought into the White House did not have the Trump movement's conservatives' best interests at heart. Surprise! GOP doesn't actually want to be conservative. Surprise! But this is a moment to make up for all of that. This is a chance for Trump to do what he promised, to do what he's been railing about, what he's been complaining about, to actually put a stop to this. Veto it. And veto everything. Veto everything until they get rid of these protections. And if they choose to override the veto, name and shame each one of them. Because ultimately, companies don't choose elections. Sure, companies can donate, but it's actually illegal for a company to donate directly to a politician. Not allowed to do that. They set up their corporate PACs and things like that, but a company can't actually donate to a politician. Elections are won by people voting. And as soon as these cowards realize they stand to lose more by pissing off the people than they stand to gain by making big tech companies happy, that is when they will fall in line. So that's why it's up to all of us to put pressure on every single member of Congress, demanding that they get rid of Section 230. And it's not just what we're dealing with YouTube right now. It's across the board, right? Joe got kicked off of Twitter. Originally, they claimed it was because he had a duplicate account. Not true. Then they said he violated their civic guidelines. Well, no. A law designed to restrict the spread of child pornography should not be able to be used to crack down on people who violate a company's civic guidelines. That's absurd. It's absurd. There are Democrats right now to this day still claiming that Russia stole the 2016 election, but they're allowed to stay. Right? Their posts are allowed to stay. If you want to post a video on YouTube saying that Russian disinformation stole the 2016 election, they will let it stay up. But if you post saying that the Chinese government stole the 2020 election and connecting the dots, right? If you dare do that, no, you'll get taken down for misinformation. This is so ripe for being overturned, but it's going to take Congress to act. And as of right now, it seems that they're willing to, at least preliminarily, to pass a defense spending bill that is attempting to call Trump's bluff. I'm hopeful that he will hold the line. I don't think that the Republicans will grant him the same courtesy that they would have granted to other Republican presidents, meaning that you do not override the veto of a president in your own party. But who knows? It's possible. Stranger things have happened. Stranger things have absolutely happened. So I've been trying to read the comments. There's lots of comments. And that's one of the challenges that we're facing, figuring out where do we go if we can't post episodes about election fraud to YouTube. We want somewhere that has a comment section in it, a place where people can comment in real time to us, and we can see that and we can respond. There's a little bit of a delay, but I like the ability to read comments and respond to them. It's easier when we have Joe on or a guest on because I'm not forced to just talk stream of consciousness like this for an hour into the camera. But I do enjoy the comment section. So if anyone has suggestions on where we can go live with, free or paid, people saying go to Parler. We are on Parler at Conservative Daily. To my knowledge, they don't let you live stream. They might. I don't know. Again, that's not something that they really advertise. I haven't found a way to live stream on Parler. We post our YouTube streams on Parler. So anyone who has, people saying make your own site, that's something we want to do. We're trying to get our tech team onto that. They have other projects on their plate at the moment. People saying take calls, Max, on your solo days. I'd love to. Maybe we'll try that tomorrow if Evan's on. Anyone who doesn't know,
I'm here.
Anyone who doesn't know, our producer Josh has the Chinese coronavirus. So he's the guy who usually screens the calls and manages the board and putting calls on the air.
We've had a lovely gentleman blowing our phone up today.
Oh yeah. So Evan is filling in for Josh while he has the Rona. And so maybe we'll try that tomorrow, but if it goes poorly, we will stop it. Not saying that Evan won't be able to get the calls on the air. Wondering, it's always a question whether or not we can effectively screen out the trolls, because we get bombarded with trolls, whether or not we have the call-in number on the screen. Every day they try and blow up our phones to stop anyone from getting through. So we'll try that tomorrow. We'll give it a shot with some calls if I'm solo again. Maybe Joe makes a recovery. Maybe he can call in or whatnot. But we'll try that tomorrow.
Hey, rumors are Joe is in the comments, by the way.
Yeah, Joe's in the comments. We've seen him in the I've seen him in the comments a couple times, posting as himself. So anyone who wants to talk to him, you can talk to him there in the comment section. People saying Evan did a great job. Yeah, Evan did a good job today. Evan did a good job. Tomorrow I'll give you more cuts. I was running the cuts myself. Anytime I say put up my screen, that's me running the cuts. Evan, I'll give you some cuts. We'll do some videos tomorrow.
Yay.
I just didn't want to overwhelm you. I just didn't want to overwhelm you today. So there's not a whole lot more to talk about today. We're being censored by YouTube. I don't think that this will qualify. We might have to continue to basically add the caveat in saying that I'm not allowed to tell you that there is widespread fraud and abuse, which is the same thing we do anytime we talk about coronavirus. We do it in terms of what we're not allowed to tell you. We'll see how strictly it's enforced. YouTube says they're going to crack down. They'll start cracking down this week, and it's going to ramp up. Who knows? Are they going to go after? Are they going to go after our previous videos? That's not good. We'll see. We really don't know. They out of the blue they changed their terms, and I guarantee that Facebook's next. I guarantee it that Facebook's next. Like we posted tweets claiming that there was voter fraud in Georgia, and they fact checked every single one of the pictures. So I guarantee you that Facebook is next. We're just gonna have to figure out a way to keep the show going. Broadcasting is not gonna be a problem. We just need to find out a way to make sure that we have a chat function, and because that's my favorite part of all of this. Well, I don't have a whole lot more for today. That's gonna be it for this edition of the podcast. If you like the podcast, make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell for notifications. On Facebook, make sure you like and follow the page. We go live Monday through Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern, so make sure you do. If you can't watch, or even if you can, make sure that you subscribe to our audio version of our podcast too. We have a couple of big sponsors that we are working on landing, big sponsors that can help really grow the show. The only way we can do that, though, is by proving the numbers. And the way we do that primarily is through views on YouTube and Facebook, but also downloads for the audio version. So if you have an iPhone, iPad, or MacBook, please do go over to the Apple Podcasts link in the description. Leave us a good review and subscribe. It really does help us out. If you don't have an Apple product, you can also find us on the Google Play Store, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, or Podbean. All different ways that you can subscribe to the show and help us prove the numbers so that we can get a sponsor. As I mentioned, you can also text the word freedom to 89517 and you'll receive a text alert when our podcast goes live. Also, there's a link to sign up for our email newsletter. If we ultimately have to leave and they cut us off without letting us even post where we're going, that's how we're going to get the word out, through text and through our email newsletter. So make sure you check out the link for our email newsletter in the comment section as well. And as I mentioned, we're on Parler at Conservative Daily. I'm at Max McGuire. Joe is at Joe Altman. Head over there and follow us there. And lastly, I will say it again, Mr. Producer, go ahead and put up my screen. Probably the last day or two to do this. If you want to pick up a Come and Take It Christmas t-shirt, help support the channel, probably one of the last couple days you can pick it up and get rush shipping and guarantee that it'll be there in time for Christmas. So if you like the shirt, we have the classic tee in all different colors. We also have the women's tee in pink and every other color as well. So if you like the show, want to support the show, want to show the world that you don't agree with canceling Christmas, make sure you pick up one of these t-shirts. Rush shipping and it'll arrive in time for Christmas. So go ahead and take off my screen now. That's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire. Hopefully we can get Joe in sooner rather than later. Oh, the music's gone. Sooner rather than later as a call-in or what. But until then, remember that the fight to take back our country isn't over, but the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together.